So the solution that you provided was you provided a federally chartered bank's platform that allowed them to have licensing and also all of the capital they needed, really, not operating capital, but lending capital to grow their platform.
Took a skill that I had, developed a platform around that skill, realized that platform was useful for other people that also had similar skills, leveraged that platform to then produce income. Rather than building teams, I acquired teams, team after team after team. And I think we ended up with, 1,000 employees or somewhere around there.
From Wealth Creators USA, this is From Worry to Wealth, the podcast that shatters the myths and mystique surrounding wealth creation. As students, our schools and universities often neglect the crucial education on the core financial principles. I'm Ben Lyons. I'm a business owner, investor, entrepreneur, and author, and I'm joined by my business partner, Alex Fink. And together, we're here to inspire your journey towards improving your financial self. In a world buzzing with advice on the behaviors and mindset to become wealthy, we'll share proven processes tried and tested by our network of successful collaborators. So get ready to move past worry and move towards wealth and your improved financial self. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast From Worry to Wealth, and I'm here with a really powerful guy, my business partner, Alex Fink. Alex, say hi.
Hey, Ben, how are you?
Okay, well, you got to say hi to everybody else.
Well, hello, everybody.
I see you every day.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. You see me every day?
Not every day. In my mind, I see you every day.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I think about you every day.
Oh, well, now it's getting weird.
It is weird.
Yeah.
I'm making all of our listeners and viewers uncomfortable. I apologize for that. And, today's episode is really exciting for me because I get to talk to you about your role in the creation of this business we had that we sold, that you were really the founder of, and I joined you. And so this episode is really to have you walk through kind of the acquisition, the development, and then ultimately the sale of a company that was very successful that you turned around. But before we really cover the details, I've got to tell all of our listeners and viewers how I met you.
I figured you would.
Because I think everyone that is listening that doesn't know this may find this really funny because I really enjoy sharing it. But it was 2009. You called me out of the blue, started talking to me about the platform that I was running, and we talked for less than an hour. I thought you were a pretty smart guy, so we scheduled a call for the next day. And that call went 3 hours. And,
sounds right.
And I hung up. I was really so impressed by you and so enjoying the conversation that I booked a flight to come to Florida with the gentleman that was president of my company at the time. And the two of us flew to Florida to meet with you in November. I think this was November of 2009.
Very cold month in Florida.
Yeah, so for those listening or watching, it was, I think, one of the coldest days of the year in Florida. So I fly to Orlando, Florida. We go from the airport. We rented a car, drive downtown. We go into this 10-story, I guess it was about a 10-story office building. Alex has told me his office is on the 5th floor in this certain office suite. We go in there. There was no receptionist at the front desk, so I started just walking back. And I get to this first door on the left, and the lights are off. And I look in this office, and I see a silhouette of a guy. And here's what I see. The guy wearing a long overcoat.
A nice coat, London Fog, I think it was.
Sitting on a Pilates ball.
I paid $40 for that guy.
I'm pretty sure you had mittens on. Not gloves, but you had mittens. It looked like mittens.
Well, if you keep the figures together, it creates more warmth.
And then I say, hey, we're here to see Alex Fink. And you said, you found him. And then you immediately proceeded, hey, guys, I'll be right back. I've got to go to the restroom.
Right.
And then you walk out the room, and the guy I brought with me, who was the head of the company of my time at that time.
And a seasoned professional in that space.
That guy was 40 years in the business.
Yes.
And he looks at me and says, what the hell are we doing here? This guy is crazy.
Right. He must not have liked my coat very much.
I don't know. But here we are in Florida expecting to see a guy in a suit, and you're dressed in an overcoat. I think you had maybe gym shorts on. And you're sitting on a Pilates ball wearing mittens.
So no wonder I had the coat on if I had shorts on.
That's my first introduction to you. But I knew from that day, I knew there was something really special about this guy.
Special might be the word. Yeah.
And it turned out there was, and that is a great segue into this wonderful story. So the story is about, I guess we had Securities Capital Management you had formed. Is that right? So
Sounds right. Yeah. Yep. Securities Capital Bank. Yeah. So what you forgot is that I had reached out to you about a year or two prior to this time too, and we never connected for some reason. Do you remember that?
no, because you said I never called you back.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. If I was
So-
so,
so-
I would have called you back.
So what's interesting is I found you with a simple Google search, and it appeared that we were trying to do the same thing.
Okay.
So as a result of that, I thought I will reach out to Ben and tell him about what I'm doing. Maybe there's some synergy there, right? And then that led into our 3-hour phone call, I guess, that we had, and your visit down. Obviously, I made quite the impression when you came down.
Yep.
And at the time, so this was 2009, so it was after the financial crisis,
Yep.
right? You had at the time, what did you have going on? You had a bank platform that you were managing at the time.
Yeah, I was part of a bank in running their residential lending operation under a branch strategy.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time, if you weren't associated with a bank, liquidity was pretty scarce, right? So banks kind of controlled the liquidity at the time. If you were in the residential finance business, you had to have lines of credit, and those lines of credit were few and far between after the financial collapse because these other banks didn't want to loan money to other people to acquire mortgages because mortgages kind of had a bad name, at the time, right? So you were part of a bank platform. I had recently taken my private company and aligned it with a bank or merged into a bank and was running a division for that bank. And I saw an opportunity to potentially work together to create a larger infrastructure whereby we would go in and provide services to multiple banks. And my thought was, if I have liquidity with this one bank, that's great. But what if something happens to that bank, right? Because at the time, they were pretty unstable in the market, right? So Ben has this other bank. Now we got 2. Maybe we should get 10 banks and try to grow our platform that way. So that's why I reached out to you.
Yeah, but what we uncovered, I think you shared with me some issues with the bank that you were hooked up with, and this was a bank out of Utah. Doesn't exist today, but what were the issues at the bank?
Yeah, so I had a private company, a private mortgage company, residential finance company, and I learned pretty quickly as the market shifted that volume was going to significantly decrease, so I had to increase my margins, I had to reduce expenses. And when you're an independent company, you're using all your own money, that's pretty important, right? So what I realized, I needed more liquidity, so I merged my company into this bank and became a division of the bank. Very, very quickly realized that nobody was treating that bank's money like their own, and they were just, their expenses and their spending was completely out of control. So my assessment was that they were burning through a lot of their cash, not being profitable, and I was very concerned because I was looking for a safe haven for most of my employees at the time. There were probably 500. I think originally I had 1,200 employees, and I think it was about 500 at the time. And my concern was, if this bank is not being run very well, the bank's probably not going to be around very long, and this is how I was going to provide a living for all these people that worked for me, so I became concerned. So
Yeah, you were so concerned, and I want to make sure everybody understands it from the perspective that I have, that you were so concerned that you went to the board of directors and the president of the bank and asked them to let you take it over. So why don't you take it from there?
yeah, it was a little different than that, in that I had strategically sort of dripped some information so that through other channels, people that were in the corporate office, to say, hey, let me give you some statistics here so you can maybe share this with the management team. And if they have any interest in talking to me, I would be interested in talking to them. So this individual made contact. Now, the CFO at the time was the former CFO of BMW and the former CEO of United Healthcare's bank. So pretty well-known guy, and the bank president had done a number of things. And so these guys were pretty knowledgeable guys, right? So they took this information. They said, this is interesting, and they actually reached out to me. So the CFO of the bank reached out and said, hey, I understand that we probably should talk about some things, and I have some concerns. So I'd like to come down and visit with you. And so that's what he did. So he flew down to Orlando. We sat for dinner, and on a single page, I outlined where I thought the problems were, with the institution. I told them that if I was running my business this way, I would 100% be out of business. And my fear was that they were going to be out of business at some point if this doesn't get corrected. My approach was, let me at least give you the information you need to properly run your business. I'd like that business to run properly, so I have a platform for all these people that work for me so that everybody can continue to be employed. I believe, he must have
said no, right? They first said we're not interested.
No, I believe he seemed impressed, and his initial reaction was, why don't we just turn over the company to you and let you run the company? And I said, well, I may consider that, but why don't you talk to the board? So the first step that the board took was to say, okay, you've brought us these concerns. This is from the CFO. We're going to hire a new president of the company. We're going to share these concerns and have the president try to turn it around. So I really didn't offer to do anything. I think they were kind of like, hey, maybe you want to run this company. And then they went another direction. So they hired somebody else. That person really didn't know what they were doing and got in there, and it was another few months of losses. And first of all, it validated my thinking, right? Because he was like, yes, you're absolutely right. We're losing all sorts of money. So I became more concerned. They went another direction, hired somebody, and ultimately came back to me and offered me to be the president of the company and pay me a pretty significant salary.
Yeah, and you turned that down.
I turned that down, yes.
Okay, and then what happened?
So I felt uncomfortable with taking a large salary without producing results for them. So I told them I didn't want the large salary, that I would work for free. And they did not like that, but they said, we don't like that. We want to pay you a lot of money. We want you to stay here for a long time. And I said, look, I don't feel good about taking money from you guys if I'm not producing value. So I would like to work for free, but considering this company has never been profitable, if and when we have profits, I would like to structure an agreement where we split those profits 50-50. In addition, to ensure that you guys aren't, going to continue to lose money, if you allow me to run the platform, I will put up a reserve. So I raised a reserve about $1 million. And I said, okay, the first $1 million, if we lose it, based on my decision making, it'll be my $1 million that we lose, right? But if we make a profit, we split it 50-50. So you guys have no risk. The only thing that you do is you pay me if we have profit. And that's eventually how we structured that deal. And in fact, I think what we later found out was they were actually going to shut down the entire company. And they essentially told me, we tried all these other people, nobody could get it working. We'll hand it over to you. We're going to give you 4 months to turn this around. And if you're not turned around in 4 months, then we're going to have to shut the company down.
Yeah, and for those listening, this is around when I became your partner.
Right.
And you were really in charge, and I was really just there to provide support. I think some of my team joined your team in support of your mission. And from my memory, again, this is 2000. This is now 2010. This is early.
Right. Early 2010. Yeah.
My understanding is that they lost a couple $1 million more, and then that's it. The board said, all right, give this guy Alex a shot.
Right. Yeah, so I think that this was pitched. There was some ruminating about the pitch, and then they finally lost another couple million and turned the company over to me.
Yeah, and again, I'm doing this from memory. You can correct all this, but so they gave you the keys. You told me about this. And
I saw an opportunity for us.
I remember this was a Friday, and I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm going to shut down all of their offices over the weekend. I said, you're going to shut down hundreds, you're going to fire hundreds of people over the weekend. You go, yep. Now, it's a long time ago, so I may have this story wrong,
Yeah.
but I thought it was like 12 offices and hundreds of people that you just said you're gonna get rid
Well,
of.
one thing's for sure, the behavior in their corporate office was not conducive to how we wanted to run the business, and there were some folks there that were not thrilled with how the company needed to be run, probably because they were there for so long and they were just used to doing the same thing. So when they turned the company over to me, their thought was to shut down the corporate office and relocate all the corporate positions to my office in Orlando. And obviously that's a pretty big cost savings.
Yeah, that memory is they were losing about 10 million a year.
It was at least 8. It was at least 8 million a year.
Okay. So you took over this operation. This was a lending operation of a bank that was losing at least 8 million a year. And then you got control of it. What'd you do? Like what
Well, first the control was, we had an agreement. I believe that I structured an exclusive arrangement with the bank where all of the mortgage operations had to come through my company. I became sort of an outsourced division manager, and we structured a 50-50 profit share, with the reserve. Because it was my money we were going to lose, and my friends and family likely too, in that, because it was our money we were going to lose, they kind of gave me the keys, to the kingdom. So clearly, reducing expenses is a very clear path, right? And no different than the money positioning system, right? If you don't have disposable income, what do? Well, you either grow your revenue, right? You grow your income, or you reduce your expenses. And so it's a pretty simple equation. So part of shutting down their existing corporate office was to reduce those expenses. They gave me 4 months. I believe I got the company profitable in about 45 days. And then within about 4 months, the division I was running became the most profitable division of the bank. Then it became the primary revenue driver of the bank, right? So as this was all getting set up, I saw the opportunity with you, and I said, hey, I've got this bank, you've got this bank. I now have an exclusive arrangement, you have an exclusive arrangement. Let's partner together. And I believe what we did was we did some resource sharing originally, right? Kept your bank open. And then I think it became clear over time that the platform that I was on, was probably more creative or lucrative, right? Better for the employees. And so we kind of consolidated later on.
Yeah, so for those listening, why don't you share maybe 5 things that you did, some very specific things that you did to take a division of a bank that was losing $8 million a month, and I'm going to just share. I mean, I went to making north of $10 million a year.
Right.
So how do you take $8 million a year? How do you go from $8 million a year, 8 to 10 million of
To
losses,
20 million a year in profit. Yeah.
to north of
Yeah.
10 million of
Yeah.
profits? How do you do that?
So obviously the first step is to decrease expenses, right? So anything that wasn't a requirement. I remember when I went to the bank the first time, people were ordering sweaters and sweatshirts and pens, and so I stopped all that. I think everybody in the corporate office had a cell phone, right? All the cell phones were gone. So really, a very, very hard look at all the expenses. Then you got to look at the part of your expenses is when you make widgets, right? So when you're conducting your business, how well are you doing that? How many mistakes are you making, right? Because when you generate a product and you sell that product, that product has a defect, that's an expense as well. So I tightened our standards and our quality control in addition to reducing our expenses, while I increased our margins. And by tightening our quality control and increasing our margins, I produced better quality loans that were actually more profitable and garnered a bit more revenue, when we sold those loans as well. So there were a number of things I did, but probably the top 3 would be increased quality, increased margins, decreased expenses.
Fundamental blocking and tackling in business.
Simple. Simple stuff.
Yeah.
A little complicated.
But
when you do
how'd
it.
you scale? And I know for our viewers and listeners, I know how you scaled, but you had a specific strategy around growth and productivity, because when the business was sold, for our viewers and listeners, in December of 2012, when it was actually contracted to be sold, in 2012, you did 1.68 billion, I guess we did, in loans
Right.
in that 1 year. And it went from like 120 million 2 years earlier.
Right.
So how'd you do that?
Right. So I knew that my platform needed a bank and liquidity to survive and to grow. I assumed that there were a number of other companies in that same situation. And so we grew through acquisition of other companies that folded into our company, because I could show those companies, if you join us, your margins are going to increase, your costs are going to decrease, and your focus can be mostly on production and making money, and not a lot of the things that you don't like compliance and everything else. So it's almost like a franchise model, right? Where you have the corporate office sort of organizing everything. And so we grew through acquisition. And the nice thing is, we didn't pay for anything that we acquired, right? So for free.
Explain that.
Yeah, well,
As
when
I say,
you
explain that.
yeah. So if you were to show up to a business and show that business how they can reduce their risk and increase their profit, so it's a pretty easy sell, right? So if you had a business and you were making $100,000 a year, and I could say, okay, you join our platform, you'll make $150,000 a year, and by the way, you'll have to work half as much as you did before. You'd be like, okay, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
So that was
Sign me up.
yeah, sign me up, right? So that's essentially what we did, and I think I was able to show that our platform could produce, more production, sales efforts would be easier, bigger company, less risk. It was a pretty simple equation.
Yeah, so the solution that you provided was you provided a federally chartered bank's platform that allowed them to have licensing and also all of the capital they needed, really, not operating capital, but lending capital, to grow their platform.
Took a skill that I had, developed a platform around that skill, realized that platform was useful for other people that also had similar skills, leveraged that platform to then produce income. Rather than building teams, I acquired teams, team after team after team. And I think we ended up with, 1,000 employees or somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think it was just around 900 when it was
And
sold.
part of the reason that I partnered with you is
'Cause I'm so handsome, smart.
there's no question.
Legit,
Right,
funny.
exactly.
I'm sorry.
That's exactly right.
Leading the witness.
Yeah. So
Please continue.
all those things for sure. And my thing was risk mitigation, right? So there's a fallback plan with your bank, and leveraging your skill set in addition to my skill set, having them be somewhat different skill sets. I figured we could go a lot farther together.
Yeah, and
I assume you saw the same.
yeah, and for those that are listening and watching, I don't have it anymore, but I had it on my office wall. This is a true story. In 2010, the FDIC and Federal Reserve lists and ranks banks based on certain ratings and performance. And in 2010, this bank was 2,654th.
Oh, you remember that number, huh?
I do.
2,654.
Of about 3,000 banks, because
Right,
it's
so-
banks below $1 billion. And in 2012, when they published the same numbers, the bank was 5.
Yeah. Fifth most profitable bank in the United
Right.
States.
So think about it. It went from almost last to almost first. That's a true statement. I had the thing because I had
Yeah,
it side by side.
that is true.
10 and 12.
Producing
I
a
should bring that in.
62% return on invested capital.
Yeah, so it's a great business story. We don't have time really to go through all the attributes, but from my perspective as the guy that joined you, you had built technology that was plug and play. I think you immediately allowed bankers to plug in. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. The infrastructure.
You removed all the bullshit that goes with running a business. You removed the compliance, you removed
HR.
the HR, the legal,
licensing.
and you allowed the production people to plug in to scale. So you created scalability, which is one of the variables we teach in the wealth creation formula. you created scalability. And through that scalability, that's how this thing was so profitable, is along with all these other things he did.
Yeah, I think that year we had 18 million of profit, and compare that to 8 million of loss. It's a $26 million swing
In 2 years.
in less than 2 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, who does that? That's pretty good.
yeah. That's not bad. Yeah, and it wasn't like the real estate market was totally on fire, at that time either.
No.
So
No. But I tell this story a lot to people because they're like, this guy Alex is crazy. What are you doing? And you know what I'm doing? I'm going to go all the way to the bank. That's what I'm going to be doing. Because I was the older guy, right? I was the guy that grew up in this business, and you were the guy in a trench coat and mittens sitting on a Pilates ball.
I was warm though,
You were warm, right?
reasonably warm.
Okay. Anything else about this story? The story we were bought out. Didn't have a great, complete twist. I don't know if we want to go into the piece.
Yeah, but we unfortunately, so we ended up being the largest shareholders of the bank, right? Because we used our proceeds to start buying shares.
Regrettably, yes.
Regrettably, yeah. So unfortunately, once we did that, the bad part of the story is once we did that, we got to a position where we couldn't actually run the bank anymore. Once you own the shares, you're not actually able to be a vendor. So we had to turn the platform over to the bank, and they didn't run it as well. I think we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. These are life lessons in our courses as we're teaching our entrepreneurship and business. This is really one of those stories and business strategies where if you're a vendor and a key vendor and it's going really well, don't try to buy the goose that you're under contract with as the vendor.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the lesson here.
That is a lesson. Yes.
If you want to piss away $5 million,
Go get 10 other banks and be vendors of those 10 other banks.
Yeah. Yeah, I sure wish somebody would have told us that lesson.
It's a good lesson to learn.
Good lesson. We didn't die, but I would have rather have had the $5 million back, if you don't mind.
Yep.
But it was pretty fun watching you perform. Not in a way, Alex. It was fun watching you execute.
Thank you.
Only I can tell the story from my lens because I saw this bank and the performance and how poorly it was doing, and then within a matter of a couple of years, it was turned around.
Yeah, and unfortunately, our viewers reflect this too. Greed sets in. Everybody, once you have a really successful thing, everybody starts thinking about people you don't need. When there are problems, everybody points, it's this person's fault, that's the person's fault. When you're doing great, it's like, we don't need this person, we don't need that person. It's just kind of a natural thing.
As if it just magically all happens.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good story, though.
We can share that piece of the story about the mistakes and the greed of other people.
Right.
And why the bank failed ultimately later after we were bought out. And by the way, for those wondering what happened with the bank, 3 years after they bought our contract out and Alex and I had nothing to do with the bank failed.
Yep.
It
was failing before we got there, and it failed after we left.
Right. And so much so that there was a chart that I took, the true story for everybody that wants really some interesting color to this story. I was deposed by the FDIC and the Federal Reserve, and I was sitting in front of 12 representatives of our government with my lawyer, and we were arguing as to why they should let Alex and I take control of this bank. And he held up a chart in front of all these lawyers that showed the financial performance 3 years before Alex and Ben and 2 years after Alex and Ben. And it was color-coded. And the only time the bank was ever profitable was when they were under contract with us.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
And we're sitting here talking to the government about saying, look, logically speaking, we're going to save a lot of jobs. We're going to save the bank's money. We're going to save the taxpayers. We're going to be the saviors of this bank. And unfortunately, back in 2013, wrong administration.
Government committed.
Government was really thinking differently. But that was the end of that story, and that's how it goes. Anybody who wants to hear more about this story, reach out to the two of us, and we'll share. But that's how we met, and it was an interesting and fun ride. I was really impressed. Anything closing arguments, Alex?
Don't think so.
Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for being with us in another podcast episode. And with that story, we'll see you in the next one.
The Wealth Creators Institute provides educational resources to help individuals expand their financial knowledge. We are not certified public accountants, financial advisors, or legal professionals. The information presented in our content is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered financial, investment, tax, or legal advice, nor a solicitation for any of the financial investments discussed. None of our content constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer to buy or sell any securities. We encourage you to consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. The Wealth Creators Institute assumes no liability for the use of this information.